Welcome to today's repertoire testing video. We have black against a 1921. We are back into the Sicilian with our favorite hyper-accelerated dragon. So, question for white is mainline d4, or do they want to deviate? I've been seeing a lot of bishop c4 lately, with knight f6 attack the e4 pawn. I'm curious that they're thinking already on move 3. Okay, c3. So before they play d4, it is important that we play d5. I believe we've seen this on move 2 in a couple of videos. I don't think we've seen it on move 3. And when they take, I'm pretty sure we're just taking that back. And then this gets very similar to the first line of the chapter where they can't play knight c3 because they've played pawn to c3. But I do think we had one video, maybe, that was in this line as well, where I think, is it bishop g7 and then takes, or is it takes right away? So I think I messed that up last time I played this, where I did not take early enough. But I'm not 100% sure I want to take immediately. But because I know I messed it up, let's try to correct and take right away. And okay, they do give me do accept an isolated pawn. Then this might be the line where we transpose with something with queen a5. I don't believe this is quite the Anand model game, which I think had queen d6. I think this is supposed to be queen a5. We haven't played knight c6 because that can have a problem with white playing d5. I think this is correct. And I don't think bishop d2 is any kind of problem. There's no discovery with the knight. Then I'm just wondering if this is ever a line where we play knight h6 to f5. I think that would only be if they played bishop e3. Otherwise we'd be happy with just knight f6. And this, I think we are content to trade bishops. I can say that there's some theory that against an isolated pawn, it is to, in this case, black's advantage to trade off minor pieces. And then the closer you get to just having major pieces left, the more of a benefit that is supposed to be to the side playing against the pawn. We're a little slow to where it's castling, though. So I was contemplating knight f6, rook e1. And this e-pawn is a small problem. I don't want to play e6 and walk right into d5. So I'm wondering how crazy it is to castle queenside, but I think bishop f4 might be unpleasant for that king. So I suspect I've played something not quite correct, because I am very slow to castle. It's not completely critical right away, like even knight f6, rook e1, knight d5. Trade another pair of knights, try to plant that queen on d5, and then if I do that, I should be able to play e6 once we've barricaded on d5. So with that in mind, white could even consider that right away, although then I can castle play rook e8 if I have to. Yes, so I think we're playing knight d5, and against queen e2, probably just e6. And it could just get a little weird if they play like knight g5 and consider some kind of sacrifice on e6, but I think we kind of have to go in for this. We could also maybe reinforce the knight on d5 with the other one through probably f6. But I do hope they take. I think that would make things a little easier. But queen e2 will be my big question. Do we include knight f6? Just play e6? I don't believe we castle away, because then takes, they take on e7. I don't think we're ever playing bishop takes d4 if they're trading a knight for that bishop, which is, as a rule, a prized bishop for black. You do not want to be trading it away lightly. Anything else for me to think about here? Not immediately. I mean, given a move, I definitely want a castle, but I think before I do that, I kind of have to play e6, because I can't let them just take that pawn. So it would be up to white to inhibit me from all of that. Okay, so bishop d2, as I said earlier, shouldn't have a threat of a real discovery, especially because queen takes knight works perfectly fine. So the question would be e6 if they play, let's say, knight e4. If I play, I would say queen b6, just so they can't play knight d6. I don't think there's a problem there. I could take the knight. Bishop takes, queen d5 is about what I would have wanted anyways, but then there could be a problem with bishop b4, and then they're cutting along the other diagonal. I can't castle that way. So I think I'm safe to play e6, and I would really like to do that. So we are going to. And if they play queen b3, probably this knight to b6, although then knight b5 gets weird. So queen b3 might be a more necessary time to take, but then we're running into problems with d5 again, so this could still get complicated. Which is not what I like to have so much in these games where I have to narrate. Yeah, with that in mind, maybe I should have just taken. But knight e4, I didn't think I was concerned nearly as much, so I said queen b6, not queen c7, because rook c1 is just a free tempo for white. But there's no pressure on d5 anymore, so the queen doesn't need to protect it. We're covering b4, as I had described one possible problem with, so there's no bishop b4. And if I get a move to castle, I think we are probably just better, because we get to play against this pawn, and I shouldn't have any big problems. They could play queen a4, attack the knight on d7 to slow that down. I don't think we're ever castling queenside. We might be able to play rook d8, because bishop a5, queen a6 pins that bishop, although I don't really want to engage in that. But I think white really needs to play one more aggressive move. Over the last few moves, they've had a couple possibilities, but here I think is a really important moment where they can't just let me castle. I'm attacking b2, but I really don't think I'm taking that, especially with the king still in the center. Like queen takes, rook b1 takes b7, I think we can rule it pretty quickly. So queen a4 should be the biggest question. I don't really want to play queen c6. If I were struggling for a move, I could, but then I would be accepting a really weak pawn of my own, which is not great. I'm very glad that they are thinking. I'm still sort of trying to work that out. Not with a lot of clear thoughts, but basically my default is still castles. I haven't come up with any other problematic moves by white. I think it's still just queen a4. Yeah, bishop c3 is not it. I'm not going to take that. Might help them a little bit to fix their pawns, but we have this really great blockade. So we are going to play a quick castles, and I wonder if I can try to apply some pressure on the clock. That might be the first time we've been able to do that in this whole series. Okay, so I'd like some easy moves. Don't want to rush and blunder some kind of tactic. I could play knight f6, try to trade knights, but then there's knight c5. So let's start with rook. Possibly rook d8, though I'm still a little wary of something with bishop a5. Not yet, of course, but if they play queen d2, I'd have to answer that. Or queen a4, yeah. So knight on d7 is hanging. Probably that leads me to playing knight f6. I think they would definitely play knight c5, but on its own, that's not too troublesome a knight. The other knight could come into e5, which is a bit annoying. So what do I think of? Rook d8, bishop a5, queen a6. could work. Do I ever take this bishop? I don't believe so. No, I think we'll move the knight and expect knight c5. Again, it would be helpful to me if they opted to trade. It's not one of those cases where your rooks just run out of squares and get trapped, because worst case, rook e8, stay on light squares, because they only have a dark square bishop. So as expected, they get this. Briefly contemplated rook takes knight, but I don't think that's actually going to be a thing. Unfortunately, knight takes, pawn takes, might just expose b7, so I can't really do that. So a little tight for moves. I might end up playing queen c6 anyways. No, I think a6 probably is an improvement. I can be careful of a fork on d7, but that's not a thing yet. Queen c6. Maybe they could have taken rook a8 takes b7. Yeah, it's probably in white's favor. Okay, that threatens this fork again. I was leaning queen b5 just to try to trade queens, because that's what's really bothering me right now. So let's do that. If they take on b7, so we're taking on c3, I might be giving up a pawn this way, now that I look at that closer. Because they'll have rook takes b5 in there, and then I'd have to argue I just get to play with active pieces and have the only remaining bishop, but definitely did not do things brilliantly on the way here. Maybe queen c7, but there's still this bishop a5. I don't know, it gets kind of weird. So they take, do I actually take this bishop? I'm not sure, because it's not great, and if I don't actually get material out of it, then I'm not sure it's worthwhile. But I don't think rook e2 is right. So b6, there's still something with knight d7. I could start with rook a8, don't love that. I was thinking about b4 as well. Maybe I like b4 and then the other pawn to b5. So they obviously have to answer that threat, and then b5 is actually just because it's a safe square for the pawn that neither of the knights can get at. I might be allowing something with knight d3 to attack this pawn again. And the downside of b5 is I can't play b6 and chase it with this knight, so I'm still not entirely sure what's going on with this, but our opponent is not a speedy guy. So it's a little unsatisfying of a finish, because there's a lot left to play in this game. But we are one step closer to 2300, which is nice. But if they just play bishop d2, like, I have not been feeling great about this game for the last 10 or so moves. Like, I think they could have made this even harder on me than they did, but as it was, like, this position was not great. Like, if they had just taken on b7, what would I have done there? Because again, knight takes bishop, pawn takes rook takes b5. They would be taking both b pawns just for their one. So I wasn't entirely sure I was going to take the bishop. Thing is, if I don't, then the knight comes back to c5, and I don't think that's great either. Like, maybe there's something we can play b4 anyways, then rook a8, and come after this a pawn. There's probably some play there. But even as is, if they just play bishop back, I think actually at this point I would just play rook c7. I didn't do that on the previous move because there was bishop a5 maybe, although looking at it now, no. There was actually b6 because our knight protects that pawn. So in retrospect, maybe I would have liked to just play b6. And I might have been forgetting this knight was protecting that pawn, so no, there isn't a fork with knight d7, takes, rook moves. There's no knight takes pawn because this knight is here. I might have just been overlooking that. So that, I think, actually does make me feel quite a bit better about this, but okay, let's come back and take a look. How bad was this? Not awful. One inaccuracy, one mistake. I can live with that, but let's see how we got with this. So yeah, I think it was d4 was our first question. Was I supposed to take that? And I still feel like I was probably supposed to play bishop g7 first, but let's confirm that. So d5, we got capture. As I said, yeah, there's no knight c3 because there's a pawn in the way, and d4, yes, I was supposed to play bishop g7. So I overcorrected compared to our previous game. With bishop g7, I think it was bishop e3 then you're supposed to take, but I left that pawn there longer than I was supposed to. So I can even check that here since I'm thinking about it. Bishop g7, bishop b3, yeah, there you were. There you are. You are definitely supposed to take at that point before they take you with the bishop support. And yeah, this is one of those branches where there are a lot of moves that white can play pretty reasonably. So we had a couple of lines to tackle all of those sidelines, but basically, yeah, okay, bishop g7 first, and then we are ready to take, I think, even for most of these moves, at least 3 or 4 of them it looks like. So that's our little bit of theory, is bishop g7 first. So we didn't do that, and it did lead us into a little bit of difficulty. I mean, it's not supposed to be that big a difference, but actually I should also check. I wouldn't transpose is the problem, because they would have played some move in between, but they wouldn't have been able to play knight c3. So I don't think there's another way to get this exact position, unless this is one of those weird transpositions from one of the other lines. So let me do a quick check for that. Queen a5. Yeah, this is the one that I would have been thinking of. Knight c3, knight h6. So that, just for reference, is actually that main line it looks like. So d4, bishop g7, bishop e3, edges out somewhat as the most common move. Then takes, and this transposes where knight h6, we want to play knight f5 and attack this bishop because it is on e3. But the way the game went, they did not commit to playing bishop e3. So it looks to me like, yeah, we were just supposed to retreat the queen, most likely to d8, which I think would confirm that that's out of our repertoire. Because I don't recall we ever played queen d8. I know there's one case of queen d6, but given that that is not supposed to be great here, no, I think this is outside of what we were supposed to play for sure. So, how did this go? Check was a strong move by them. Castles, and yeah, I mean, I realized right here that I was in some difficulty. I'm not sure I would have guessed it was as high as a 0.8. But I thought for sure. Rook e1, knight d5. Okay, I can give some credit to them. Bishop d2 looks like a good move. I thought it was queen e2. I should be safe with e6, but I was a little nervous about knight g5, if there was any chance of them taking on e6. But I think now that I'm looking at it, because knight takes attacks their queen, it shouldn't work out for them. Like, I'm nervous because if we go knight takes, if we ever take that, queen takes, and both of the knights are hanging. But as I had described here, I guess rook e8 as well. But mostly I would just be looking at this, attacks the queen, that at least releases the one loose knight, and then I think worst case, we can take this, and then rook f7 protects the other knight. Okay, and yeah, Lichess is doing this weird thing where they're adding annotations to moves, which I don't think anybody is enjoying right now, but ignore that. So bishop d2, e6. Yeah, this is the moment where I said queen b3 I was not prepared for. So I had picked some good moves from my opponent, I just did not avoid them myself, because the problem is this is now a very serious threat. I also do not like that they're attacking b7, which is, by the looks of it, maybe one of my better bailouts. Like if we just castle and let them go takes, and then, or sorry, my queen is hanging, so I have to play queen takes, not pawn takes. I guess that protects b7, but then this is just a better position for white because they have one active rook, they can get a second one. I think this knight is unstable for the moment, which probably gives them time to bring a rook down to the 7th rank, so altogether there's a lot of not good about the black position if they play queen b3, because yeah, there just isn't a good answer otherwise. I think like if we take here, either capture, but probably I'd lean b takes just so they get to keep their pressure on the file, and I don't see any d5s showing up here, but again, I haven't castled, so this is something to be very aware of if they ever get a move to play that. Knight e4 was not as good. You're supposed to play queen a6. So what did I run into in the game that caused problems? I think it was that bishop a5 stuff, that maybe it's worth staying on a light square just to completely stay away from that bishop. Because there isn't really a benefit, I guess, to b6 if we're trying to justify the difference. I'm going to ignore the h4 stuff. But what else would white play? Like, what did they do in the game? Bishop c3. And I think, yeah, it's probably just easier for all this. And actually, come to think of it, I said queen b6, I was wondering about queen a4, and I'm seeing that down here as well. So that's probably the biggest difference, is we get to stop queen a4, which, as the game went, yeah, that was the other time I said they really should play a more aggressive move with queen a4, because now the problem is this knight is being attacked, so I can't castle. And okay, my best move, yeah, would just be to go right back to a6 and accept damaged pawns. I was not happy that I might have to allow something with knight d6 check, although I guess at least if this pawn is moving, it's not being lost. But yeah, I didn't have a good move ready here, so that could have been a problem. And because of that, again, queen a6, I don't think we're fully satisfied with our position yet, but looks like we're castling pretty quick, and we have guarded our weakest points for the moment. Bishop c3 gives me that move that I needed. Rook b1 felt like we should be able to start developing more normally. I'm happy that this looks like it is pretty clearly a bit better for black. Even knight f6 is good. Even a6 is very good, I think. Of course, that changes as the depth goes up and down, but looks like it's near the top, so that's excellent. Queen c6 was my other candidate. They take that, then b6 first, yeah. And then that queen does not have as much freedom. But a6 was to safeguard that, partly because I wanted to be able to try to trade queens with queen b5. Partly that we're just guarding against something with bishop a5 still. But knight e5... yeah, I had some visions of trying to push the b pawn, so queen a7 is kind of a cool move too. It also gets away from this possible fork with knight to d7, and then we'll have options either to chase the knight or maybe at some point to chase the queen as well. But I think most of all b6. I think this has become a somewhat irritating knight, so it's worth trying to chase that away. But I went for more of a bailout, queen b5. And yeah, it should be equal if they grab this pawn. So I think I had come around to playing b4 here. I wasn't totally stoked by going through these trades, but it looks like, okay, I do have enough activity to justify dropping that pawn, just that I don't know how much luck I would have trying to win this. Because all my pawns are on one side of the board, I'm going to have to catch this a pawn, like rook c2, a4. Knight e4 is funny, they can't take because of the back rank. I think it's much more natural to play knight d5, but I don't know, this pawn starts running, and I think if you didn't have the computer's help, I don't think a lot of people would be saying this is equal. But it looks like we'd have enough counterplay to hold on to this. And it doesn't look like it's even that sharp yet. Like, black has some different moves they can play, and they aren't getting into big problems. But they played rook e2, which, again, I thought was just a really passive move. Not pushing me around at all. And then I got a little too creative, maybe, with b4. So we can either take that. Okay, I didn't see that follow-up. You can play knight d5, the other knight, and they've lined themselves up for a fork, sort of like they were setting up on d7. I would have something similar with that on c3. And then I'd said also b6 is what I wish I had played, because I just missed that. If we go with this, then it's not actually any kind of fork. Or I guess maybe we should use the other knight to demonstrate, just because that was hanging. But same kind of result. If we go through this, then they can't take this pawn, because I have a knight protecting it, which I just didn't quite catch on to. But the other line, yeah, is knight takes c3, and then if they take, then knight d5, and we get to go after this pawn instead. And I would imagine there has to be something with b6 coming up. It looks like a lot of bishop takes e5 followed by b6. So we're attacking the pawn, I have to protect it. I guess we'll pick bishop or rook b3, take that. Rook takes b6, knight has to move, and then we can take on c3. And then how easy is it to hold on to these b pawns? I guess they can't play knight e4. Is there e6, or do we let them take on e6? What happens with knight e4 to try to protect this pawn? f6 takes. I don't think we're trapping that rook, so what exactly is the point there? b4, okay. And trying to take advantage of their back rank again, since this pawn is technically pinned to c1. You could also play rook c6, which I think that would set up that threat of f6, yeah, because white would not ever take c6, possibly also with doubling. But b4 is a nice strong move. because they can't take us, and then if we get to take this pawn with something, then okay, we get a passed pawn to work with. That would be very promising for black. I think that was about all I wanted to look at with this branch. Yeah, just that we get to take on e5 and then play b6, and that gives us our target to play against, and they don't find themselves with time to capture one of black's weaknesses themselves. So we misstepped a bit with b6. That's kind of funny that my only mistake was the last move, and they ran out of time. So let's say bishop d2. I was thinking about this. b6, rook c7. Yeah, natural moves. I don't think those would have been too hard to find. c7 protects the pawn where it is rather than pushing it, although I'm interested that there is, yeah, a lot of rook to a8. And I would like to point out that part of the point of playing b4 is we're pseudo-freezing the pawn on a2. Like, if we attack it, they can't really push because there is this pawn cramping it. And if they have to play rook a1, I don't think that's something they're happy with either. So, something you'll see, like, if you accept doubled pawns and you open a file by making that capture, like, yeah, you're accepting sort of a pawn weakness, but the idea is you have plenty of compensation for it on the next door file. So if you play with this, I don't know, I'm not really sure how else to demonstrate how this might go, but you just pick like a random move, and then just keep trying to apply pressure, I guess. Not totally obvious how this game would have gone. Would have liked to have played it out, but I guess we will have to leave it there. So we got another one of these c3 Sicilians today. Got to see me misplay this move order again, so I hope you have studied it more closely than I have. Bishop g7 first, then we take. This is our big position with the c3 Sicilian. So thank you for watching today's video, and we'll see you for another one soon.